Hello and welcome to Theme Park Information. In today's show we're going to be looking at development for Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Now this is effectively the roller coaster capital of the world. They have a really nice mix of roller coasters of various heights, sizes, types. So there isn't a huge amount of options for what they actually really need to build. But that's not going to stop us speculating because they are over 150 years old and we kind of expect that Cedar Fair might celebrate this fact sooner or later. So let's get into it. Let's first have a look at what rides they could potentially build. And it's going to be pretty difficult to predict this, so let's have a go. So one thing which has been mentioned is a lot of people kind of think that their 150th anniversary will be seen as special, so they're going to build a spectacular, one-of-a-kind coaster. I actually have a feeling that they could actually just build, not going to say anything, but I think they could actually, maybe not quite have that sort of logic or idea. I think they're just going to build what their park needs as opposed to going absolutely over the top. And especially in the current kind of like climate of coronavirus and such like, I can see them maybe, not say playing it safe, but building something which doesn't exactly, break the bank or isn't a complete prototype. So let's have a look. So, completely ignoring the break the bank thing, but I can see them potentially building a high-end, being a wing coaster. Now these are, really, really cool, generally really liked by, general public. They're really interesting. And with a custom layout, you could potentially build a fantastic ride, something similar to Totsu or Flying Dinosaur and stuff like that. The only downside is these rides are kind of expensive to build, and I'm not 100% sure whether or not they would do. But that would be one possibility. Obviously, the other possibilities are either like an RMC T-Rex or Raptors. Effectively, they're a single rail track design by Rocky Mountain Construction. There's only a handful of them around at the minute, but for example, Jersey Devil is about to be opening this year at some point, hopefully. Six Flags, Great Adventure. So potentially, they could maybe see an option at that. Again, they aren't actually super expensive and effectively could have a really airtime filled and inversion filled layout. So, and they could be quite tall and big, and also they kind of take up a kind of a small footprint in some ways. You could build them very narrow. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a potential idea for them. The T-Rex is effectively very similar, just the track is bigger. So effectively instead of one across, it would be two across. That would be the only downside with the Raptor model, is you'd only have one person. Even though I actually kind of have a sneaking suspicion, you'd still kind of, especially if you were to do what they do at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, where effectively they kind of just have it where one person joins the train and it continually moves, and they're free trains. So it's kind of, I think you'd actually go through that line very quickly. And you just limit the line, I suppose. Not 100% sure they'll go for that though. Now, weirdly, one of the things I think they can kind of potentially build is actually a water coaster. And the park doesn't really have any water rides, particularly. It has like a rapids, but that's kind of it. And it could fit really, really nicely, especially if they also wanted to get rid of like something like Snake River Falls, which is effectively a tidal wave on steroids with a huge drop. But if they wanted to kind of build that sort of area, then I actually reckon this would be a really, really cool concept for them. They could have it heavily themed, something like Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld, that sort of thing could spring to mind. And that could work really well for the park. Not sure if that's the most popular one. Water coasters don't necessarily tend to be extremely popular, even though it could look very photogenic and interesting and would be something very different from every other ride in the park. So that's a potential idea. The other one would be effectively one of the new Vekoma models, like the Vekoma Shockwave, for example. And even though they kind of have Maverick, which would be very similar, I can see this kind of being different enough and potentially maybe more inversion heavy, or maybe a little bit more extreme, maybe a little bit, of a different layout. Again, I can't quite see it. I just think it's a little bit too similar to Maverick, but these roller coaster ideas from Vekoma are effectively springing up everywhere. But I will be honest, I do think something like that coaster at Cedar Point would go very nicely. A slightly longer, slightly taller version of it could be seen very positively. The only other last few are probably a little bit unlikely, but something like a Mack spinning coaster. Unfortunately, Mack is quite an expensive manufacturer to work for, even though they do have high quality products. But I can kind of maybe see this sort of idea happening. Effectively, it's a spinning coaster with inversions, launches, very similar to Time Traveller at Silver Dollar City, which unfortunately I haven't been on, but looks pretty sweet. So I can maybe see that being a potential option. And I suppose finally, for, you know, potentially kind of realistic coaster idea would be obviously some sort of massive wooden coaster. So they, at the minute, only really have, you know, Blue Streak as like pure wood coaster. Obviously Gemini and Steel Vengeance are both hybrids, so it would be very interesting to see this as a possibility. I mean, it's one of the things, obviously, like, you know, like Gravity Loop or something like that. Like, I'm not sure if Cedar Point really kind of has the space / area / you know, like, desire to particularly build one. I do appreciate that I'm effectively second guessing them, but I'm not really sure you can get like a really solid, interactive, interesting layout from what potential areas they could get. So I'm not 100% sure we're ever likely to see this type of model, even though a small part of me would love to see something very similar to like Hades 360 at Cedar Point, where it effectively actually uses up an area of the car park to do some insane like inversions and go back under. Like, yeah, that could be a potential idea, but the only problem is, for that to work, I'd have absolutely no idea where you'd begin to build a station or house or anything like that. So yeah, I'm not so sure about that one, but it would be a really cool concept. But anyway, so as I've said about locations, let's get into them. And I will be honest, Cedar Point is effectively completely covered by sea. The area itself is heavily developed. There's not exactly many spots for them to pick to build. Now, as I said previously, they potentially could do something where they effectively build almost like an extra island off of it, like effectively reclaiming land from the sea, lake technically. So that would be a potential option, you know, especially over by Wicked Cyclone, Twister even. That would be the sort of area I can see them doing, where they effectively build out and could build a large-scale roller coaster on that. The other options would potentially be, for example, they have 2 antique cars, so potentially you could use one of those areas to build it on. And I will be honest, there's also a massive farm area, and petting zoo sort of area with like their sky coaster and stuff like that. So that potentially huge area could be obviously renovated and redone. That's also not to mention the fact there is a pretty massive lake in the centre of the park. I'm not suggesting they should fill it in, but obviously you could potentially build over it, but obviously that does greatly increase cost. Or obviously you could end up removing like a coaster which is already at the park. So, for example, something like the Cedar Creek Mine Ride would be a potential option. Or, depending on the ride type, if, for example, you are building like one of the RMC like T-Rexes, you could just technically build it out into the car park. If you really wanted to, that'd probably save you a little bit of time, money, and effort. Yeah, it's a really awkward one because, yeah, Cedar Point do have, you know, so much, you know, kind of expectations of them building something absolutely fantastic and amazing. And I'm not just 100% sure that they'll actually, you know, not so they won't pull it off, but I just think obviously they have such limitations for space and, you know, where they can actually do it. But yeah, I mean, you probably feel them, you don't really want to remove any rides at this moment in time. I mean, they generally have a really good line out in terms of coasters, and they kind of don't really need to remove any of the ones they've got currently. So, I mean, if it was up to me, I'd probably take away like the the farm bit, but I could appreciate that is a really nice family area. It's also a really nice break between where like Millennium Force is and like the back of the park where like Maverick and Steel Vengeance is. It's a really nice little area. I mean, obviously as well, they could work on like Millennium Islands and stuff like that, which is where like Dinosaurs Alive used to be, but then again, that's also still got lots of stuff for Millennium Force, so I don't know quite how much space would be available to build a coaster on it. All of this is very interesting. Obviously, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more content, leaving your thoughts of what they should build and where they should build it down below. And hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.